Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. Seamen of Reddit, what is the scariest thing that happened to you while you were at sea? For fire protection on ships with large engine rooms, we can dump a SHT load of CO2 into the space to smooth the fire. It's a big deal if you have to use it because it will kill anyone in the engine room if they don't get out within 30 seconds of hearing the alarm. I ran as fast as I possibly could to the escape hatch and bolted up the ladder 3 rungs at a time. Turns out a new mate was inspecting the release station and unwittingly set off the alarm by opening the cabinet containing the release valves. That's a sound I never want to be surprised by again. Sometimes pressure can build in the tank and you can release it by opening up a valve. Well, someone didn't and a huge jet of clear liquid shot 40 feet into the air. Now I didn't know what it was and it could have been anything from acids to palm oil. I had to go take ISHT at about 2 in the morning. I didn't tell the guy on watch I was going out on deck. Our toilet was a 5-gallon bucket on the starboard side of the vessel. So, I am doing my business when all of a sudden I see a fairly large wave coming at us broadside. All I could think was I am going to get swept off my bucket and sent across the deck with my pants down and turds scraping by me right before my fanny pack style CO2 primed flotation device explodes. A girl I know is a fisheries observer for the NOAA and goes on trips for weeks at a time with random fishing crews. One time she was 90 miles offshore, the only girl on the boat, and the whole crew started shooting up heroin. One of the guys got really touchy and started saying really creepy things. She had to spend 3 more weeks on a boat with these people. I found a large-ish leak on our main saltwater cooling line while we were around the Aleutian Islands. Granted, the hole was only about the size of a dime, but seeing a jet of water spraying into the bilge, which was rapidly filling, rapidly increased the pucker factor on that trip. Further complicating matters, the boat was old enough that everything, generators, main engines, AC equipment, was cooled with salt water. After we made it back into Kodiak, the boat went into dry dock, where it stayed for 6 months because they kept finding other major no-sail items. A huge, about half the length of my ship, so approximately 100 to 140 meters squid about 70 meters underwater. We were working on setting up buoys and clearing a few nets to relay a new batch. It was blood red in color, far from me but still close enough, about 300 meters away. The tentacles were thick as FCK. It kept floating nearby, eventually disappearing from our sight. The only time I've seen a creature like that. I am really thankful it didn't attack any of us. I sure as hell wouldn't have survived. This happened in late 90s in the Pacific Ocean. Hit a storm in the Southern Ocean in an icebreaker. We were getting 55-degree rolls. Men who had been at sea for 20 years were throwing up on the bridge. Water was getting in everywhere. No actual flooding but everything not actually bolted down was all over the deck. Not me, but my son. He was Coast Guard and was boarding officer to do an inspection of one of the crab fishing vessels in the Bering Sea, think World's Deadliest Catch TV show. His crew got him back on board and the inflatable rushed him back to the main ship. He said it took him hours to stop shivering. I sent him a pair of swimmies in the mail. He didn't laugh. I'm not a sailor but almost died, at least it felt like it, on a Carnival cruise. Captain was an idiot and got too close to a hurricane. Entire boat rocked back and forth to what felt like 45-degree angle, very steep to the point we were fighting to not slide down the floor. We didn't know what was the right thing to do. So much crying and screaming. People were donning life jackets and crew was taking down lifeboats, though none actually went off the side. All the pools spilled out into the ocean, and all the glass storefronts and most plates broke. We were stuck on the boat an extra 4 days, part boat problems part Miami port needed to be cleared out, and we were bored to tears because all the stores were closed, pools were empty, and we were given leftover food day after day on what plates remained. Not fun. I'll never forget that first half hour or so where I was sure I was going to go down like the Titanic, but had to pretend it was normal for the sake of the kids. No more cruises for me. Coming up into summer of '05 my dad decided that our family was going to do a once-in-a-lifetime trip. We learned to sail, got all of our certifications and spent the summer sailing all over the Caribbean on a 40 sailboat. Well, turns out August of '05 was a bad time to be in a 40 boat in the Bahamas. We managed to avoid the worst of it, But we spent 2 days running to a safe harbor to weather the storm in the worst seas I've ever seen. Definitely had a night where I wasn't sure if we were going to make it or not. I still sail a bit here and there, but my dad decided that he loved it. Old man in the sea, I guess. He's the skip on the Stars and Stripes now, sailing for a full-time job. This was in the bay, but the boat ran out of gas under the Chesapeake Bridge at night. Only had a small flashlight for visibility and ended up using water skis to get out of the path of a cruise ship hauling through. My fear wasn't for my safety but for the safety of the guy on the other boat. A few years back my dad and I had just tied up as a nor'easter was rolling in. My dad, being the thick-skulled gung-ho adventurous man that he was, agreed to go looking in this terrible storm. Our boat could handle it, we had gone through many storms before with no problem. Our boat had 2 outriggers that served as stabilizers, so capsizing wasn't a big concern. He didn't even have a radio. We were literally looking around in the dark for him for an hour. We shouted for him to put on a life vest. Turns out he had none on the vessel, nor did he have a life raft. To make it worse, his anchor chain wasn't a chain, but a single rotting dock line, so his anchor snapped. We had to wait there for the Coast Guard to hone in on our beacon since they had no way of locating this guy's boat, and they were able to retrieve him. Thankfully, his monstrosity of a boat crashed against the rocks after he had been carted away. My dad was sailing alone in Lake Erie. He was adjusting the rigging on his boat and fell into the water and his boat kept on going. He thought he was effed because there wasn't a boat in sight. But later 2 guys on some jet skis passed by and picked him up. No damage though. Launching my helicopter off the deck in a heavy sea was always stressful, but overall, I had confidence in both vessels that I worked on. Even in the heart of a typhoon, and that happened several times. I posted this already on Reddit somewhere else, but this is a good spot for it too. I was a Navy sailor who went out to sea many times for weeks at a time. One of my jobs was being a lookout to spot boats, planes, things in the water or air pretty much, and report it back to the ship. For anyone who hasn't been out in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night should realize you see many more lights in the sky than you would ever in a city. And on Navy ships they like to have very little lights on at night, so standing watch around 1 AM feels very alien sometimes. There was this one time I saw a bright green color moving in the water slowly and I didn't know what it was. My mind told me maybe it's oso or something else. Eventually I was told it was just plankton, but it sure looked freaky to someone who wasn't aware of the glowing plankton produces. I would see meteors streak across the sky, but a couple of times there were bright lights moving slowly way out there. Perhaps a satellite, maybe, who knows. Either way, those were the few times I saw for myself how vast space really is, and that there was so much unknowns out there that humans have yet to discover or explain. On a 41-foot sailboat in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, with about 7 other men, doing a shakedown/test cruise, planned to be out for about 12 hours. Mid-1980s, not as reliable weather prediction resources. We had just barely rigged storm hawsers and storm sails because the one fellow on board who was the best sailor since the storm was almost on us, otherwise we would have died. During the storm itself, I expected to die at any time. For what seemed like 15 minutes, we were in a maelstrom, no visibility, but then it passed. We would live. This was at about 3 p.m., and although there was cloud cover, of course, the ambient light was such that you could see 2 miles or so in any direction. If you're familiar with the sea, you know that such storms, particularly in shallower depths near land masses, dredge a lot of things of the sea floor. We're all on deck, working lines, checking damage, etc., and the bay around us is choppy and churning and foaming. It was like a thin man, with humanoid shape, arms articulated like a man, a human head, but its skin was covered in scales like a snake. It looked at us, blinked its weird, heavy-lidded eyes, then dove back under. So maybe you need to know a few things about me at that moment. No drugs, no alcohol, no injuries. I was elated because I was glad to be alive, but my senses in that situation were sharpened, not dulled. All around the world, I was not the type of guy to see a patch of seaweed and call it a sea monster. I made an instant decision that I was not going to say anything. What could I say? I just saw a strange creature, take my word for it. The men on this boat were all mechanics and engineers and professionals. And as I stood there in my life vest, soaking wet, hooked onto the steel lifeline, glad to be alive, One of the other sailors, a USN Captain J.S., with over 30 years experience in the surface navy, piped up and said, "I just saw a brown thing pop up on the surface. It looked like a lizard man, with a scaly face. It blinked at us with these big eyes and then went back under." "Yeah, I saw it too," I said. No one else said that they had seen it. Then we sailed back to the pier later that day and didn't speak of it again. I was a lookout on a naval submarine during a storm in the Atlantic. The tower of a sub is tiny 4'X6 and slippery. Subs tip side to side a lot too since they are tubular. The waves were giant, probably 20 feet from top to bottom, but they were very long and had no crest. It helped that the officer of the deck was crazy like Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump and was holding the rope to his harness like he'd just lassoed the submarine and was yelling "Yeehaw and yaha-ha-hooey" every wave. It made me chuckle and think I was going to die. We were on a D7 patrol off the coast of Cape Cod and the fog was ridiculous. Like see 3 feet ahead and that's it, and our horn was on 5-second blasts. It's hard for the lookout to see much, and our radar has a hard time picking up anything under 50 feet in such weather. Well, I'm on helm and I hear my boy on lookout yell something. The captain is on the bridge, rare, and is walking about. The first LT goes out to ask what's up. Now we were going about all ahead 3, which was slow, but still a lot of momentum for a 270-foot cutter. The captain yells an old command we don't use anymore, "all back" or something, but I get the drift. Just then, I see it. A 30-foot small fishing vessel off our bow like 50 feet away and closing. Looked like all wood and older in build. I pulled the engines from ahead 3 to back 8. The fishing boat slides just past our bow and misses by no more than 10 feet. The captain was freaking the FCK out but put his hand on my shoulder and says "Ya did good kid" as he turns around and leaves. Rest of watch was kind of stressful but wow. Our steel hull would have obliterated them. Fuck the fog. Jaws dropped off the hook. It was actually a hammerhead, but a big fellow, about 6 and displeased. We jumped ship. Dude did a lot of damage to the boat until we got him off. He lived to sail another day. Bit late to the game and not my personal experience, but a very good friend of mine was out in his boat at the coast of Western Australia, with his dog and another friend. Copped a freak wave to the side that managed to half sink the boat, followed quickly by a second that did the job. Epir was kept in the stowaway, instead of on his person, biggest mistake, and they had no way of retrieving it, so he and his mate were stuck 7 kilometers offshore, sitting ducks. I think this is the point of the incident that has caused a lasting effect. I can't fathom having to watch your best mate get sucked up by the ocean knowing there's nothing to be done about it. Anyway, this guy is pretty healthy, always been very active, and a semi-pro free diver, no stranger to the ocean and hard work basically. So during this, mate's partner realizes that he isn't back in time, and they have a system in place should this ever occur, so she gets on to the authorities, gives them the general location and time they were supposed to be back, and they start looking, but to no avail. My mate literally swam 7 kilometers in the open ocean to the nearest island, I believe it was Garden Island, a naval base located off Perth, over the course of about 5 hours, to be rescued by a vessel moored on the island. He gave them the coordinates of his mate, they tell authorities, and he gets picked up. I know for a fact these guys have never really gotten over this incident, and I can't begin to imagine what would have been running through their minds. Thankfully my mate is a very well-adjusted person and is generally pretty awesome. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.